Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Form Check Friday. I'm here bathing in the glow of a circuit I just finished, post-Pilsen, doing a little deloading, CrossFit cardio type stuff, and we're gonna do some form checks. So getting right into it, we got a video from Nikita, super strong name, Nikita Drozdovs, and he's deadlifting in our gym right over there. I don't think I've ever met Nikita, but come say hi next time you're here, man. Anyways, so he's doing some deadlifts here. He's on a deadlift bar, and you can see that I think the biggest thing is that we're just kind of jerking into the bar a little bit. I think especially with a deadlift bar, we want to take advantage of that little bit of slack we can pull out of the bar to increase our leverage and our positioning right off the floor. So if you do it right, you can really utilize the fact that you can pull into that bar and pull the bend out of the bar before the plates even leave the ground and get into a little bit of a more upright position, akin to like a really short block pull almost, or something like that on a stiff bar. So that would be the biggest thing that I'm seeing here, and it's causing you to kind of get pulled forward a little bit just because we're kind of smacking into the bar. So I would practice maybe with some tempo deadlifts or some pause deadlifts, pausing just off the floor to really reinforce a good, strong starting position, and not necessarily easing into the bar, but being a little bit more patient off the floor, really making it a push and focusing on getting the slack all the way out of that bar, making sure that everything is in position and moving before you start trying to accelerate into the bar. Other than that, honestly, your basic mechanics look really good. So for the most part, I keep doing what you're doing. Just play around with that starting position, how tight you are when you initiate the lift. Should go a long ways for you. All right, so next up, we have a video submission from Marcello. I'm not sure the pronunciation of your name, but super happy to feature you, man. This is kind of a success story here. I'm always happy to get these and look through our inbox and find out that somebody's technique has become this much better from either having his form checked on the show, which in Marcello's case was, and other people submitting videos just because, you know, they've watched the show enough that they've learned some stuff and it's helped. So super cool to see. We'll show you guys sort of what happened and the sort of before and after, if you will. So in this video here, we can see Marcello's hips are coming up as he initiates the lift. He's sitting down a little bit too far, overextending at the top, not pulling the slack out of the bar, etc., making a number of mistakes here. And in the next one, we're seeing a lot more consistent starting position. We're seeing his shoulders locked down. You can see a little bit of movement. Shoulders slide down the mid-back a little bit. That's very good. It shows that we're getting some appropriate lat engagement and you know, some good bracing for the deadlift. We're seeing his hips raise a lot less, being a lot more patient off the floor. Shoulders more aligned with the bar, more consistent starting position, which I said already. But yes, lots and lots of things corrected from one video to the next. So thank you for sending that in, Marcello. That always makes my day, and I'm happy to see that you're lifting better. So our next few videos come from Shawn. Now Shawn, first, we did some squats, and we can see that Shawn's making every attempt to stay super upright, and as he gets to the bottom, everything kind of forces him to go forward. So you can see where Shawn's attempts to stay super upright in his squat kind of backfire a little bit, forcing him to assume a more chest down position, as well as messing with his shoulder alignment a little bit. Now, Shawn, I think if you purposefully and mindfully put yourself into a little bit more of a leaned forward position and allow some of those changes to happen as you sit into your squat, you're going to be a little bit more consistent at the bottom of your squat, and you're not going to have to struggle for a position that's maybe less than optimal for you in the first place. On to Shawn's bench press. Now, Shawn's bench is kind of not the best angle to see a lot of what's going on with the shoulders, but one thing I'm noticing in terms of the bar speed is we're getting a real noticeable dip right into the chest. And again, similar thing, it's causing us to have to try to fight to regain position out of the bottom. What I would recommend for you to do, Shawn, with your bench press is spend more time on the chest, focus on some lighter touch stuff, even if it's just as an accessory movement. Focus on almost just trying to touch your t-shirt, get a little bit more comfortable in the bottom position, and that's gonna, again, lend itself to more consistency in terms of your positioning and your drive out of the bottom of your lift. In the deadlift, Shawn, we're seeing what I'm going to start coining as hip creep. Now, we're seeing right as you initiate the lift, your hips ever so slightly rise up behind you. We lose a little bit of external rotation, and 9 times out of 10, that's gonna lead to a loss of positioning in the lumbar and the hips. So that's gonna lead to that loss of extension, forcing you to come up to the top and lock out with back extension, which we're seeing a little bit of a discrepancy in the speed from, say, the knees to the top, whereas that should be the fastest part of the lift and the most consistent part. We're seeing a little bit of slowdown and struggle through that, which indicates to me that we're a little bit out of position. So what I would say is slow down the lift a little bit, try to be a little bit more patient off the floor. Don't allow that knee crash, and make sure that we're, again, really pushing to start the lift. Take your time, make sure everything's in position. Once the bar is moving and you feel locked in, then accelerate into the bar, just like I said to Nikita earlier. So our next submission comes from Felix. Now, Felix sent in 2 different angles of his sumo deadlift. Felix's main complaint with his deadlift is that he's having his hips shoot up a little bit and he's getting into a little bit of a stiff-legged position. Now, first, let's take a look at the front angle here. Now, we can see right as Felix initiates the lifts, we're again seeing a little bit of that collapse in the knees, a little bit of valgus crash, loss of external rotation, whatever you want to call it. And that is a big part of why we're seeing the hips come up. That usually goes very much hand in hand with that sort of movement fault. So a couple things I would recommend based on the front view here. Number 1 is I would try simply being a little bit more patient. Like I've mentioned to a couple other lifters with their deadlifts, a little bit of patience off the floor goes a long way. The other thing I would recommend, because we're seeing a little bit of this angle to start off with, a little bit of a valgus angle to start off with, is I would actually move your stance in a tiny bit. I know you mentioned in your email maybe you should move it out. I would try moving it in slightly so we have a little bit better stack in the joints so that the ankle's directly below the knee when you pull into position. And that might help you avoid some of that valgus knee crash as well. Now, based on the side angle, the biggest thing I would recommend is trying to sit back into it a little bit more. So not necessarily sit down, because that cue can get a little bit confusing, but just try to shift everything back a little bit, so you're a little more on your heels, and again, focus on making it a push. And I would also try to reorient your upper back and your head, because right now you're kind of looking down into the deadlift, which I find often, again, sort of goes hand in hand with that more tilted forward, almost stiff-legged position. So if we can fix your gaze on something ever so slightly higher, get that chest up just a tad, and I really want to emphasize that it's going to be a subtle change. I don't want you to go into like overextension and pull everything through and end up wrecking all of your trunk bracing. But I do want you to try to get maybe shoulder blades down just a little bit, chest up just a little bit, and fix your gaze on something a tiny bit higher, as well as sit back. Some of those things may make more sense than others, but let's try some of those cues out and see if we can't get you into a little bit more of an upright position, making the lift more of a push off the floor than, you know, getting into that stiff-legged position. Lastly, we have some squats from Anton. Now, Anton actually has a really, really good looking squat. But if we watch this set as it wears on, we're seeing a little bit more and a little bit more of a sort of shift of the weight back on the heels and forward in terms of the bar and the trunk as the set wears on. So the biggest thing, I always go back to that cue of trying to keep the knees forward out of the bottom position, making sure that you're using the quads as much as you can and really focusing, on using the quads, making sure that the weight doesn't shift too far back on the feet. So those cues, if you're not necessarily prioritizing those kinds of cues in your head, can help. The other thing I would recommend is some tempo squats, specifically a slow tempo down and a slow tempo up without a pause in the bottom. I think those can go a long ways to figuring out positioning, making sure that we're initiating, and also being mindful of that sort of transitional phase out of the bottom through the, you know, first third and second third of the lift, to make sure that we're conscious of positioning and how we're driving out of the bottom, as well as some pin squats, because pin squats really punish that sort of pattern where you're falling forward out of the bottom and losing that you know, sort of ideal quad drive. So those two movements I think programmed in as well, maybe one at a time, depends what your squat frequency is like. I don't know, I'm not going to get into programming here, but those two movements I think would be beneficial for you. Anyways guys, that's it for Form Check Friday. Wanted to thank everybody for tuning in, thank everybody for the submissions once more. We really do help that this We really do hope that this stuff helps you guys. That's the whole point of it. That's the whole reason we sit down and we do these videos every week, is because we get success stories like Marcello's, and that's what it's all about. I did want to take a second to remind you guys, I have a free program on calgarybarbell.com. You guys can go through there. If anybody's on my strength book, I got some programs on there that are free to use for premium users. And as well, we're gonna be getting back into the apparel game. So you like this hat, you like this, we're gonna get some more stuff like that. We're just in the middle of a bit of a transition, trying to figure out production and etc. But we will have more apparel. I know we've had a lot of people asking about it. So for the people, by the people, right? Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Hit that like button, subscribe, all that stuff. See you next one.